Welcome to Logistics Unplugged. My name is Brian Blaylock, and I'm your host, and I'm happy to jump in today to all things logistics. So let's pull back the curtain, take a look under the hood, and have a great discussion. And today we have a very special guest and a continuation of a very special series on summer shipping. And our special guest is Jimmy Canzolino, the Senior Director of 3PL Client Strategy at Blue Grace Logistics. Jimmy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So
do you call everybody a special guest, or am I really a special guest?
You're the most special guest.
Okay.
So if I have to put them in order, I need you to turn your mics off for just a minute if you are someone who's been on before. You're number one, Jimmy.
Thank you. That's all that matters.
All right. So, we're going to have some serious stuff to talk about today because we're going to talk about some of the ramifications of natural disasters and storms and fires and all the worst parts of it. But before we get there, Jimmy, let's have a little fun.
Love it.
I need to hear a little bit of the history of Jimmy. I know where you are now. I know what you do. But is this the dream? Is this where you thought you were going to be, pre-high school, college? Is this where you thought you're going to wind up?
How honest do you want me to be here? Because it's a good story. It's one I often share.
Let's go with a good story. We can always delete it if you say something that gets me in a lot of trouble.
No, it's not troubling by any means. But like most people, I was not growing up playing outside going, I can't wait to be a logistics broker. That was not me.
I was doing that.
Well, then you're the one that I know. So I will put that in the column of you're the only.
Thank you, sir.
No, I was, despite what I wanted to be when I was younger, I wanted to play basketball in the NBA, but I found out that I was too short, too slow, and a little too awkward to be that athletic. So we'll just nix that off the column. But
that's a recurring theme for us, Jimmy. There's a lot of us failed athletes on these 100%. On these calls.
I thought I would at least get a 10-day contract, but not a chance. I went to Colorado State for school, and I was playing lacrosse out there. Came back home. I had an opportunity to play some lacrosse for a team called the Chicago Outlaws.
Wow.
And chasing a little bit of a pipeline dream. Now, I was not nearly as good as my teammates. Some of them went on to play pro. I never really had that opportunity, but my dad came to me and was like, Jimmy, you are chasing a pipeline dream. You are bartending. You need to get a job that is going to be sustainable. So I love you, but this isn't it. So I was like, okay, what do I do? My dad was the deputy chief of the VA. So pharmaceutical sales is naturally where my head went.
Absolutely.
Realized that I wasn't pretty enough for that. So I decided to start reaching out to some of my friends who already had jobs. And a buddy, I'll spare you some of the nitty gritty, but a buddy came to me and was like, hey, I think you would be really good in logistics. And the first answer I said to him in front of a group of people was like, I was a communications major. I'm not good at math. And I knew I said something wrong immediately because everyone's kind of looking at me like, math? What does math have to do with this? And I was like, right, like the logistics button, the log button on the calculator. He's like, no, you moron, trucking. And my immediate response to him was, I don't want to drive a truck. And he's like, dude, just apply and let's see what happens. So I applied to Coyote Logistics.
Okay.
And when I was looking at all the fancy buzzword titles, there was like sales executive. And I was like, I'm not an executive.
Sounds fancy.
I applied to be a graveyard tracker for the night shift. And my buddy called me back and he's like, look, I'm going to throw you one more bone. I'm talking to HR. You're not going to do the graveyard tracking. You're going to do the sales executive role. And lo and behold, somehow I got in. I shook enough hands and never looked back.
I'm glad they pulled you out of the graveyard, Jimmy.
Yes. I'm glad. Me too. Trust me.
I'm actually even shocked that that's the name of a position that you
It literally said on there, graveyard shift. I was like, ooh, all right, not ideal, but I'll take it.
I like it. So we got out of the Night of the Living Dead, and you became a sales executive, and no looking back, right?
No looking back.
It is an interesting thing. Once you kind of dip your toe in this water, it's really hard to get out of the pool, isn't it?
And it's funny, too, because even those who try to take their toe out of the pool always come back.
Yeah, that's very true. That is very true. And I'm gonna rewind for you a little bit because I didn't even know is there professional lacrosse in
there is.
That's awesome. I knew that, and so I'm gonna take you one more off-brand discussion here. So lacrosse, I don't know a lot about it except for kids that had a lot more money than me usually played that when I was little. But I know Jim Brown was like supposed to be one of the greatest lacrosse players of all time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I have him up at my top of my best running backs of all time list. So since we made this beautiful transition, who's on top of yours?
For running back?
Best running back.
I mean, being a Chicago Bears fan, I'm going to have to be a little biased and just say Matt Forte.
Oh, that's where you went? I thought you was going to go Walter Payton.
I mean, yeah, sure, I'll go Walter Payton. I'm trying to think more like relative to my era. Walter Payton was before my time, but from actually seeing someone play and actually going to Bears games, Matt Forte.
I like it. James just aged, or excuse me, I called him James like
There
only
you
the
go.
proper people do. Jimmy just aged me out, and because I'm a Walter Payton fan. But no, that's great. That's actually a good choice too. You surprised me on that one. All right, final fun question. It's summertime. What's the best thing to throw on the grill?
Oh, I'm just gonna have to. This is kind of a basic question. Actually, no, I'll switch up a little bit. I am gonna go steak, but I'm gonna go with flank steak because my wife and I love making street tacos.
Okay,
and we have a phenomenal flank steak recipe
I like it.
that we did not get off the internet, mind you. This was kind of like a trial and error.
Okay, so no TikToker gave you that special recipe?
No, which is shocking because I feel like my wife, she does a pretty good job of keeping her house together, and she'll cook probably 4 out of the 7 days. And usually 3.5 of those days is something she pulled off TikTok or Pinterest, and they're 3.5 fails.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you found a success in the middle of it, right?
There we go.
I like it. All right, so we had the fun stuff. Like to do a little more of that, but we got to get into the things we don't like to talk about. We know shipping can be affected by lots of things. Supply chains have to deal with disruptions all the time, but this is the summertime series, and we want to talk about some of the disasters that can affect folks trying to get products from origin to destination. So talk to me about some of the disruptions you see, and I'm going to try to come in and be a little bit more specific. We know there's always hurricanes. We know there's always X, Y, and Z. I'm going to let you start with your own alphabet and give us some of that X, Y, Z.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said kind of the big one, right? The hurricane is kind of always the talk of the town in freight brokerage. You know, what is kind of looming and when is hurricane season actually has its own time, right? We've obviously, as of recent, seen a lot of the wildfires impacting the West Coast. Tampa Bay was obviously impacted by a hurricane not too long ago. Tornadoes in the Midwest. There's a lot out there, and even just flash flooding, right? There is. It really boils down to what is the detriment to the infrastructure, and what is that going to do to supply chain. You see it in kind of all various shapes and sizes, and it kind of shockingly comes regardless when. Chicago, or I should say the Midwest and the Northeast, you see a lot of the polar vortex stuff. So if there's a seasonality piece to it, you know, rain, sleet, or snow, it's probably have some kind of impact. And then you get a little more into the serious natural disasters of fires, hurricanes, and tornadoes. It's going to play an impact across the entire U.S.
For sure. I mean, it's not like we can shut down, right? People still have to eat. People still have to get dressed. People have to have fuel and everything else that goes with it. So is there any type of proactive planning that you can do, at least knowing that there is a season, there is, you know, there are times of the year that are more disruptive than others? What do you do to plan?
I wish there was an easy button, right? Like, how do you plan for a black swan event, right? There's not. It's a be ready, right? It's a be ready and a contingency plan. How are you, from a broker standpoint, how are you going to be staffed appropriately? Who's going to be that call to serve when that comes? Because the impact varies, right? Whether it is and kind of to your point, we still need to eat and people are still shopping, right? The consumer demand is still there, especially in regions that aren't impacted, but maybe that specific shipper is, or maybe that inbound load is. So you have to be ready to just support that. And it's a tough balancing act, because what do you expect from your sales team or your account management team to call impacted areas and be like, hey, I heard you just got hit by a hurricane. Can I help you? It's tough, right? Like, you got to be, we want to offer help, and we want to do it in the most humane way. We want to be very cautious in how we offer that help. And we also want to make sure we actually are helping and not capitalizing on a very unfortunate situation. And I think the best way to help is support. What does that support look like? And is it the right amount of support so that you can ensure you are taking as much off the impacted area's plate as possible, so that you are actually helping push forward versus just trying to make a short-term win?
I like it. I mean, the first 2 words you said, be ready. You know, I hate to put like a Scouts motto in there, but be ready. And being prepared, using technology, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, or ask you to talk about that in a minute. But I did want to go into one more specific thing, and I don't know whether it did or whether it didn't, but there were some serious wildfires in California a bit back that did some incredible damage, and I feel so bad for those folks still dealing with that. But talk to me about weather and how much that affected supply chains during that time.
Shockingly, the wildfires weren't as impactful from a supply chain standpoint as one would think.
Right.
When you actually look at the region, the Palisades region of what actually was hit, I'm sure there were some off crops that were hit to a degree. But for the most part, really what it provided was congestion, right? What happened to the infrastructure? And I said that earlier. What happened to the infrastructure, meaning what happened to the roads, right? There were delays, simply put. So how do we help with that? Where does a provider come in, whether it's asset or broker, come in to help alleviate some of that? It boiled down to communication. It boiled down to having multiple options to be ready to get whatever the goods were delivered or picked up. Was it extra staff as well to help just make sure that we're doing 24/7 around the clock communication? But really just what was impacted overall from that moment I remember specifically was it just took a lot more hand-holding to ensure things were progressing forward.
Absolutely. And I alluded to a minute ago, but I'd like you to dig into a little bit more. I know that the all hands on deck can't be replaced with technology, but talk to me a little bit about how technology can fit into the solution, especially when you need on-demand capability of finding coverage.
Tech makes everybody better, right? It's the way we're utilizing tech today isn't to replace the head. It's to make that individual more effective and efficient. So getting that and sharing that tech, with people across the aisle or, in other companies, it just gives a streamlined form of visibility, right? It's allowing us to do more in real time to alleviate some of those stressors that, either a driver is going through or a shipper consignee is going through. But implementing that tech from GPS tracking, visibility to our TMS, whatever it may be, allowing tech to play that role so you're eliminating a manual touch point does two things, right? Like I just said, it's going to make it more effective and more real time, and that's really all you can ask for in that moment.
Yeah.
Tech isn't going to get the truck there faster. Tech isn't going to make a truck appear out of thin air.
Right.
But the staff supporting that is going to generate the appearance of trucks popping up, right? Options, making sure that we're getting those outbound calls to get the support structure.
That's such a great point. You can't make them be there, but can sure let you know when they are.
Right.
And it's, humans at this point still drive the majority of the trucks, at least. I don't know if the other parts come into fruition yet. But, but the ability to effectively communicate, Jimmy, that's got to be key. I mean, we can almost deal with anything if we know, right?
Absolutely.
So the knowing is where part of that solution comes in, and so glad that there is technology that can be in place so that you can tell somebody the difficult truth sometimes and give somebody enough information so that when something different has to be done, you can flex, you can change and do what you have to do, right?
Not communicating is essentially the equivalent of not doing anything at all, and that's the worst outcome, right? So having that, to you said, sometimes it's the hard truth. There's no reason to suffer in silence, right? Everyone understands the stressors that come with some black swan event, such as wildfires or hurricanes, right? So understanding just you're in it together, you're trying to push forward, you have one goal in mind, but how effectively and quickly can you do that, I think should be the sentiment shared.
Yeah, 100%. And technology is a piece of it, but just in general, what you said, communication. A 3PL, a broker, has to be able to communicate with the carriers. We have to be able to communicate with the shippers. Every piece in this link, that's why it's a 3PL, right? Because you got three pieces of that. You got the shipper, you got the carrier, you got someone in the middle of that that's trying to keep that handshake moving. And there's nothing worse than the communication dropping because you're afraid of what the response is going to be to that communication.
Exactly.
Take your medicine, help your customer, make it better, right? That's that's our underlying goal with when we do these podcasts is we want something that someone hears to make it better. We want that to be the result, right?
Absolutely.
So, Jimmy, I neglected one of the questions that I wanted to ask you that was burning in my mind. It is the summertime series, right? And we don't even know, because obviously coming from the Chicago area, you're an expert on beaches, right?
Because we have so many.
You
to
have
choose
so
from.
many great options, of course. So, favorite beach? Any thoughts?
I'm going to attempt to throw a curveball at you just to show you my well-traveledness throughout the
I like
U.S. I'm going to go Seaside Beach.
And where is Seaside Beach?
I could not tell you. I just know it's a little west, I believe, of Destin.
Okay. So it is in the state of Florida.
It's in the
I
state
just
of
wanted
Florida.
to clear that up for any listeners.
I went to a friend's wedding out there who unfortunately was on the podcast just before me. Hopefully this does a little better than his. I went to Holt's wedding, and it was the reason why I love it is, one, it's beautiful, but I feel like there's a lot of beautiful things in the state of Florida when it comes to sand and water. But it is quartz sand, white quartz sand.
Oh, yeah.
So when you walk, it squeaks. It's hilarious. And obviously the water's crystal blue, so just throw that in the mix. But it's also fun fact where they shot the movie Truman Show
Nice. Yeah.
with Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And I stayed in my Airbnb was in the neighborhood of where they shot that movie.
I love it. That's fantastic. I don't mean to make fun of our partner in his squishy sand over here with the lack of beach knowledge from Florida, but you did paint a pretty nice picture from a Chicago guy,
Right?
explaining our beaches down here.
What was I going to say? Evanston Beach, North Ave. You're like, what? Who is this guy? Lake
Yeah,
Michigan?
Is that a real beach? Is there an ocean attached to that?
It looks like an ocean.
It really does. I have to admit, it really does look like an ocean to me. So great information. But before we go, any last little key takeaways you want to give to the folks that not even just planning around the potential of disasters, because when they're listening to this, some of those have already happened. Some of those might be in front of us. But last little tips on effectively making sure that you're ready to get your products, goods, and services to the end of the line. Anything you want to share?
The loaded question, but I'll try to answer to the best of my ability.
That was my best loaded question.
My standpoint is kind of going back to the tech and people piece. You can never underestimate the power of the human and the relationship, right? You have to be able to support your employees and prop them up in a position to win, and that takes support, and that takes a lot of effort. And not a lot of people are willing to invest in that piece of the business, right? There's always a cost to operate a relationship, right? No matter how you look at it, the best way you're going to win is to ensure that the people have support and the people are getting in front of the customer in the right way. And if you try to leave anything skinny or you try to leave anything, we're going to cut some corners, it's not going to work, especially to how it pertains to any kind of summer seasonality, whether it's supply chain, just disruptions from what we're talking about here, natural disasters, or even if it's just kind of a spike in regional growth. You have to be able to be willing to invest in your customers. And you also have to be willing to invest in your carriers. And that takes people. People will take tech a lot further. And in kind of the same breath, tech will allow people to take tech a lot further. So you have to be able to kind of play both sides of the coin there.
I like it. Well said. And perfect place for us to make it a wrap for today. I want to thank everyone for listening in. We thank the ones that tune in every Tuesday, and make sure you do next Tuesday. And I want to thank Jimmy especially for being here with me today. And thanks for the plug on what kind of steak was that again that we're throwing on the grill?
Flank steak.
Flank steak. Make sure you get your flank steaks. Get ready to do some grilling. We'll see you next time on Logistics Unplugged.
Thanks for having me.